Elizabeth asks for a divorce and surrenders to her husband one last time. He leaves her unable to walk the next day. Elizabeth never imagined that the night she would finally end her ghost marriage would turn into the most impossible revelation of her life. She entered the Crimson Lounge, a luxury club in the heart of Manhattan, with a brown envelope in her trembling hands and 3 years of resentment lodged in her throat. Dressed in navy blue, hugging every curve, high heels echoing on the marble floor, jasmine perfume cutting through the heavy air of Cuban cigars, and expensive whiskey. Her heart raced when she saw Richard sitting in that impeccable leather armchair, as always, but with something different in his gaze, a vulnerability she had never seen before. What should have been just the cold signature on divorce papers turned into a brutal confrontation of 3 years of silence, lies by omission, and a shocking truth. While she suffered, feeling abandoned and believing that her billionaire husband had chosen his empire over her, he was destroying conspirators, sending traitors to prison, and recovering millions to clear her family's name. But this discovery came at a high cost. It cost a whole night of desperate surrender and her ability to walk the next day. Leave a like and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10, because what comes next will take your breath away. 3 years ago, Elizabeth Smith believed in fairy tales, not the naive kind with helpless princesses waiting to be rescued, but the adult version. Partnership, complicity, building an empire side by side with the man she loved. Richard Anderson was not just her husband. He was the youngest and most feared CEO in the New York financial market, owner of a corporation that moved billions in international investments. When they got married, Elizabeth was 29 years old, had a degree in corporate communication, and worked as an image consultant. She didn't need his money, she only needed him. The mansion in Manhattan was a dream of glass and concrete, with gardens that looked like paintings and a view that encompassed all of New York, illuminated at night. Elizabeth woke up every morning with coffee made by the housekeeper Sarah, financial news to understand Richard's universe, and planned elegant dinners to host European and American investors. She loved that life, especially the way Richard looked at her when he came home, tired and tense, but always finding a genuine smile upon seeing her. Elizabeth's father, Dr. Henry Smith, was a respected independent financial consultant in the New York market for 3 decades of honest work. A serious man with glasses and neatly combed grey hair, he had built his reputation brick by brick, client by client. Her mother, Mary, was a retired literature teacher, passionate about poetry and herbal tea. Elizabeth grew up in a middle-class home in the Upper East Side, where honesty was non-negotiable and character was worth more than a bank account. When Richard asked for her hand in marriage, Dr. Henry had only one question: "Will you take care of my daughter in the bad days too, or just the easy ones?" Richard answered without hesitation, "In the impossible days, doctor, especially those." Elizabeth held on to that promise like one holds a gold ring. She believed she trusted. Then came the day when everything crumbled. It was a Tuesday in March. Elizabeth was at a salon in Brooklyn, getting her nails done and laughing at some silly joke the manicurist was telling when her phone exploded with notifications. The first message was from her best friend, Julia. "Liz, turn on the TV now, any news channel." Her heart froze before she even understood why. On the screen was her father's photo, plastered as a criminal. The headlines were cruel, brutal, devastating. Financial consultant embezzles millions from clients in Ponzi scheme. Billion-dollar fraud shakes New York market. Respected businessman is actually a long-time con artist. Elizabeth felt her legs tremble. The entire salon was looking at her, some clients with pity, others with that malicious glimmer of those who love to see others' misfortunes. She grabbed her bag, left the money on the counter, and ran out barefoot, holding her shoes in her hand, tears blurring her vision. She called her father. His voice was broken, unrecognizable. "Daughter, I didn't do any of this. You need to believe me. I didn't do anything." She called her mother. Mary was crying so much she could barely speak. "Liz, there are reporters at the door, cameras. They're shouting horrible questions. Your father is having a crisis. He can't breathe." And then Elizabeth did what any wife would do. She called her husband. Richard answered on the third ring, his voice tense, background noise of voices. "Liz, I know, I just saw. I'm in an emergency meeting with the board. This could affect our European investors. I need to sort some things out here first. Richard, my father is unwell. My mother is in panic. There are reporters at their house. I need you now." Silence on the other end, a silence that lasted 3 seconds but felt like an eternity. "Love, I'll handle this. Trust me. Just give me a few hours to understand what's happening." "And a few hours?" Elizabeth's voice rose hysterically. "They're calling my father a criminal on television. A few hours won't change that. Liz, listen. If I show up by your side now, the press will associate the Anderson Corporation with the scandal. It will make everything worse. I need to act strategically behind the scenes. Understand? I'll hire the best lawyers. I will—" She hung up on him, heading straight to her parents' house in the Upper East Side. The scene was worse than she imagined. News vans parked on the street, reporters with microphones surrounding the gate, curious neighbors peeking from their windows. Elizabeth walked through that corridor of humiliation, with her head held high but her heart bleeding. Inside the house, she found her father sitting on the sofa, hands trembling, pale face. Her mother. Elizabeth paced back and forth, twisting a piece of paper between her fingers. "I didn't do anything," Richard kept repeating like a mantra. "Someone forged documents. Someone created false transactions. I didn't do anything." Elizabeth hugged her father and felt his body shake with silent sobs. That man, who had always been a rock, a pillar of strength, was now shattered. Richard didn't show up that night. He sent a message. "Love, I hired 3 lawyers. They are reviewing everything. Trust me, I love you." Elizabeth read it, but didn't respond. In the following days, the harassment worsened. Photos of Elizabeth leaving the building were plastered on gossip websites with malicious captions. "Con artist's heiress lives a life of luxury while victims mourn their losses." Reporters surrounded her on the street, shoving microphones in her face, asking cruel questions. "Did you know your father was stealing from the elderly? Will he return the victim's money? Your husband is involved too." And Richard had vanished on emergency trips, calling late at night, exhausted, always with the same excuse. "I'm working on it, Liz. I just need a few more days." Julia, her best friend, was the one who held Elizabeth when she fell apart. A fierce lawyer with curly hair, always tied up in a bun, and a piercing gaze that cut through lies. Julia didn't hold back. "Liz, where's your husband? Where's the man who promised to protect you? He's letting you bleed alone while he protects his damn empire." Elizabeth tried to defend Richard, believing he was working behind the scenes, that his strategy made sense. But every time she looked at her father, feeling shame for her mother, having anxiety attacks at night over her own shattered image in the press, the truth hurt more and more. He wasn't there. A week after the scandal, Elizabeth begged, calling Richard at 3 a.m, crying with a broken voice. "I need you. I don't need lawyers. I don't need strategies. I need you to hold my hand and tell me you'll stand by me no matter what." The response came in the form of an email from his lawyer the next day, with the subject line, "Legal guidance for Elizabeth Smith." The text explained in cold, technical language that it would be best to maintain a temporary public distance to protect both reputations during the ongoing investigation. It was at that moment that something inside Elizabeth died. Love turned to bitterness. Trust turned to ashes, and the promise shattered into 1,000 pieces. She left the mansion in Manhattan, taking only a few bags of clothes, rented a small apartment in Brooklyn, far from everything that reminded her of her fairy tale life, blocked Richard's number, and ignored the letters he sent. 23 over 6 months, all burned without being opened. She kept only 2 things she couldn't throw away: a few of his shirts that still smelled of the cologne she loved, and the wedding rings locked in a little box at the back of the drawer. 3 years passed, 3 years in which Elizabeth rebuilt herself, brick by brick, just as her father had done decades ago. She returned to work as an image consultant, gained big clients, bought her own apartment, and learned to live alone. She learned not to need anyone, but it came at a price. She never loved anyone again. She went out with a few men, polite dinners, empty. Conversations, tasteless kisses. None came close to what Richard had been, or what she thought he had been. Until one rainy Tuesday night, 3 years later, Elizabeth made the decision that would change everything. It was time to end that ghost marriage once and for all. She took the divorce papers that Julia had prepared months earlier, placed them in a brown envelope, wore the navy blue dress that Richard had always loved, and went to the only place she knew she would find him: the Crimson Lounge in the Gardens, where he closed deals every Tuesday at 9 o'clock. She didn't go there to reconcile, she went to bury it, or at least that's what she believed. If you've ever felt the pain of being abandoned by the person who swore to protect you, leave a comment sharing your story. And if you're curious to know what Richard really did during those 3 years of silence, stay with me, because the truth is more shocking than you can imagine. For 3 years, Elizabeth built a fortress around her heart. She woke up at 6 in the morning, did yoga in her Brooklyn apartment while the sun rose over the city, brewed strong coffee, and reviewed image consulting proposals for companies needing to rebuild shattered reputations, just like she had done for herself. The irony didn't go unnoticed. The apartment was small, but it was hers. White walls decorated with plants, a shelf full of self-help books that Julia insisted on gifting her, a comfortable sofa where she spent her nights watching series that didn't require real attention. On the walls, some photos from old trips. She and Richard in Aspen, smiling over fake snow. She and Richard in Malibu, embraced on the beach at sunset. Elizabeth never had the courage to take those photos down. She told herself it was laziness. But the truth was different. They were the only proof that love had once been real. In the bedroom closet, hidden behind work dresses, were 3 of Richard's white shirts. She took them without thinking. That morning she fled the mansion, and now she didn't know what to do with them. Every time she opened the closet, the woody scent escaped like a ghost. Every time she thought about throwing them away, her hand froze on the doorknob. So they remained there, silent witnesses to a marriage that officially no longer existed, but emotionally had never ended. Richard's letters arrived for 6 months. The first came 2 weeks after she left home. A cream envelope, expensive paper, firm and desperate handwriting. Elizabeth held that letter in her trembling hands for a full 15 minutes. Adaptosois: Julia, Bea, Liz, Dr. Henrique Almeida, Dr. Henry Smith, Mariana, Mary, Crimson Lounge. The Crimson Lounge, before lighting the lighter and watching it turn to ashes in the kitchen sink. The second letter came 3 days later. Same handwriting, same desperation, same flames. 23 letters in total, all burned without being read. In the 10th letter, Julia asked, "Liz, don't you have any curiosity about what he's saying?" Elizabeth replied with a coldness that even startled herself. "If he wanted to tell me something, he would have said it when I needed to hear it. Now it's too late." But it wasn't too late for the wedding bands. Those Elizabeth locked in a velvet box at the back of the nightstand drawer, white gold, engraved with their initials and the wedding date, June 15th. Sometimes in the early mornings, when insomnia bit hard, she would open the drawer just to look. She never put them on her finger. That would be admitting to something she refused to feel, but she also never managed to throw them away. Julia teased, "You burned 23 letters, but can't throw 2 wedding bands in the trash. You know what that means, right?" Elizabeth pretended not to hear. Meanwhile, life went on. Her parents slowly recovered. Dr. Henry Smith, after 8 months of exhaustive police investigation, was officially exonerated. The charges were dropped. The press published small, discreet notes apologizing, nothing compared to the horror show they had made during the destruction, but at least his name was cleared on paper. The problem was that reputation couldn't be rebuilt with a footnote. Dr. Henry lost clients, lost contracts, lost the trust of people who had known him for decades. He aged 10 years during those months. His hair turned completely white, and his hands developed a subtle tremor that never went away. Mary, his mother, had anxiety attacks that required psychiatric support. She spent whole nights awake, reliving the humiliation, the cameras, the reporters' shouts. Elizabeth visited her parents every week, bringing lunch, sitting with them in the living room that used to be filled with laughter, but now breathed heavy silence. Her father tried to smile, but the smile never reached his eyes. Her mother held her daughter's hand and always said the same thing. "At least you're okay, my daughter. At least you managed to get out of this." Elizabeth lied that she was fine, lied that she was okay, lied that she had moved on. But at night, alone in the apartment with the city lights down below and the deafening silence inside her chest, the truth screamed. She had never moved on. She tried dating. God knows she tried. She had dinner with a tech businessman that Julia insisted on introducing her to. The man was handsome, successful, funny. He told jokes that made her genuinely laugh, paid the bill without making a fuss, and asked for a second date. Elizabeth accepted. On the 3rd date, he tried to kiss her in the parking lot. It was a technical, correct kiss, nothing wrong with it, but also nothing right. It lacked the taste she remembered, the warmth that used to melt her. Elizabeth pulled away, inventing some excuse about not being ready, and never answered his calls again. Then there was the lawyer she met at a corporate event, charming, intelligent, interested. 3 dinners, good conversations, reasonable chemistry. On the 4th time, he invited her to his apartment. Elizabeth accepted. They went up, he poured wine, played music, and kissed her slowly, with the technique of someone who knew what he was doing. She responded, tried to give in, forced her body to feel something. But when he started to take off her shirt, Elizabeth froze. The perfume was wrong, the hands were wrong, the voice was wrong, everything was wrong because nothing was Rodrigo. She left that apartment crying in the elevator. Julia stopped insisting after that. "Liz, you need therapy. You can't spend the rest of your life stuck to a ghost." "I'm not stuck to anything. I'm free. I'm fine." "You're lying to me and to yourself." Maybe Julia was right, but Elizabeth was too good at pretending everything was okay. Work helped. It allowed her to rebuild the reputations of others, create communication strategies, turn crises into opportunities. All of this kept her mind occupied. By day, she was the brilliant consultant, the strong woman who had risen from the ashes. By night, she was the abandoned wife still sleeping with a pillow and dreaming of a marriage that should never have ended. And then, one October afternoon, 3 years and 2 months after the separation, Elizabeth made a decision. She was in Julia's office reviewing contracts for a new client when her friend threw a folder on the table. "The divorce papers are all filled out. You just need to sign and hand them over for him to sign too." Elizabeth looked at that folder as if looking at a death sentence. "Julia." "Liz, it's been 3 years. 3 years that you've been living in a legal and emotional limbo. You're not really married, but you're also not truly free. This is slowly destroying you, and I'm not going to sit here watching you define yourself because of a man who abandoned you when you needed him most." The words were harsh, but they came from a place of love. Julia had always been like this, brutal, direct, but fiercely protective. Elizabeth opened the folder, read the cold, technical, impersonal terms, dissolution of the marital bond. It felt like a death certificate for a love that once meant everything. "Where do I deliver this?" Julia smiled, satisfied. "You know where he is." "Every Tuesday, night." And Elizabeth knew. Rodrigo was a man of rigid habits. Every Tuesday at 9 p.m. he closed deals at the Crimson Lounge, Cuban cigars, 20-year-old whiskey, leather armchairs, and powerful men discussing millions as if discussing the weather. That's how, on a rainy Tuesday in November, Elizabeth prepared for the end. She chose the navy blue dress that Rodrigo always loved, not for him, but for herself. She wanted him to see her. She had lost everything and wanted him to feel the weight of the choice he made 3 years ago. Impeccable makeup, hair cascading in waves over her shoulders, jasmine perfume that he always said made her irresistible. She picked up the brown envelope with the divorce papers and tucked it into her handbag before calling an Uber. Julia texted, "Are you sure about this?" Elizabeth replied, "I've never been more certain about anything in my life." It was a lie. She was terrified. But what Elizabeth didn't know, what she had no idea about, was that on the other side of this story was a completely different version of the facts. While she spent 3 years rebuilding herself, believing she had been abandoned by a cowardly husband who chose the empire over her, Richard Anderson was waging a silent and brutal war behind the scenes. On the night the scandal broke, Richard didn't disappear out of cowardice. He vanished because he realized something that Elizabeth, in her pain, couldn't see. This wasn't an accident, it was an attack. The timing was too precise. The scandal erupted exactly 1 week before he was set to finalize a $3 billion deal with European investors. The accusations against his father-in-law were too detailed, too documented, too orchestrated to be a coincidence. Someone had manufactured that bomb with a clear objective: to destroy Richard through the woman he loved. So he made the hardest choice of his life. Instead of standing publicly by Elizabeth's side and letting the Anderson Corporation sink along with her reputation, he decided to hunt down those responsible. He hired private investigators, ethical hackers, criminal lawyers, and spent countless nights sifting through financial documents and corporate emails, tracking suspicious transactions. It took 4 months to find the first clue: irregular bank transfers coming from within the company itself, and another 3 months to identify the culprits. Mark Taylor and Robert Fisher, 2 senior executives at Anderson Corporation who wanted to sabotage the European deal, to take control of the company in a behind-the-scenes coup. They knew that Richard's wife was his weak point. They knew that attacking her family would be the cruelest and most effective way to destabilize him. They had an accomplice, Danielle Brown, a compliance manager who falsified documents, created fake transactions, and planted evidence against Dr. Henry in exchange for $200,000 and a promise of an executive position when Mark and Robert took power. Richard gathered evidence for 1.5 years, recordings of conversations, bank statements, and emails proving the conspiracy. He handed everything over to the federal police, testified in confidential inquiries, and risked his own reputation to ensure that those 3 would pay for what they did. In February of the 2nd year, Mark, Robert, and Danielle were arrested. The press covered it, but discreetly. Corporate crime doesn't sell as well as fraud scandals. They were sentenced to 8, 10, and 6 years in prison, respectively. Richard ensured that every penny embezzled from Elizabeth's family was recovered and returned with interest. More than that, he publicly cleared his father-in-law's name, paid for ads in newspapers, press conferences, and official statements, ensuring that Dr. Henry was recognized as a victim, not a criminal. Then he did something even Elizabeth's parents didn't expect. He went to their house in Upper East Side one Saturday morning and asked for forgiveness. Dr. Henry opened the door and stood in silence, staring at the son-in-law he hadn't seen in 2 years. Richard didn't try to explain himself or justify his actions. He simply said, "I spoke with your daughter, I spoke with you, and I spoke with Mary. I thought I was protecting all of you by distancing myself, but I only caused more pain. I came here to return what was stolen from you, to clear your name as you deserved from the beginning, and to ask for forgiveness for not doing this sooner." He handed over a complete dossier. Evidence of the conspiracy, court sentences, proof of financial restitution, and a check for the full recovered amount, plus a reparations fund he created to help other victims of corporate fraud. Dr. Henry held that dossier with trembling hands, and Mary cried. Then the father-in-law, the man who had every right to slam the door in Richard's face, did something unexpected. He extended his hand and said, "You were wrong, very wrong, but you fixed it. Few men have the courage to fix their mistakes." Richard left that house with the forgiveness of Elizabeth's parents, but without the only thing that truly mattered, her forgiveness. Because Elizabeth never knew any of this. He tried to tell her, sent 23 letters explaining everything, all of which went unanswered. He tried to call, but he was blocked. He attempted to go to her apartment, but the doorman had orders not to let him up. So Richard gave up, accepted that he had lost the love of his life, accepted that some choices, even when made with good intentions, destroy bridges that can never be rebuilt. He spent the last few months living on autopilot. Work, gym, an empty apartment, no dates, no romances, nothing that reminded him of intimacy. Only the tattoo he got 6 months after the separation on the left side of his chest, in delicate letters, the name Elizabeth and the date, 06-15, the day of their wedding. It hurt like hell, both the needle and the symbolism. He knew that tattoo was pathetic. He knew it was a sign of a man who couldn't move on, but he didn't care. Elizabeth was etched on his chest, right over his heart, and that was exactly where she should have always been. It was too close to forget, and it was with that hidden tattoo beneath his impeccable suit. 3 years of guilt crushing his shoulders, and the certainty that he would never have the chance to fix the biggest mistake of his life, that Richard sat in the Crimson Lounge on that rainy Tuesday in November. He expected nothing, just another night of empty meetings, tasteless cigars, and whiskey that didn't warm him, until the club door opened and Elizabeth walked in like a storm of silk. The navy blue eyes, icy yet fiery, and a brown envelope in his hands that Richard knew at that moment carried the end of everything. The Crimson Lounge was exactly as Elizabeth remembered. Black marble floors reflecting the golden lights of crystal chandeliers, Italian leather sofas strategically positioned in corners ensuring privacy, a heavy aroma of Cuban cigars mixed with expensive perfumes and aged whiskey. Jazz music played softly, just enough to cover the business conversations that moved millions. It was the kind of place where power and money met to dance. Elizabeth crossed the room with her back straight, chin held high, heels echoing in the deliberate silence her presence created. Men in suits stopped talking to look. Waiters froze with trays in hand. She was an apparition, the kind of woman who did not go unnoticed, not because she sought attention, but because she carried a storm within her chest, and it seeped from her pores. Richard was in the same corner sofa as always, left side of the room, back against the wall, a complete view of the entrance, a strategic position for someone who never lets their guard down. He held a glass of whiskey he hadn't drunk, his gaze lost in the window, showing New York illuminated below, rain tapping against the glass like a war drum. When he saw her, the glass almost slipped from his hand. Elizabeth watched his reaction with a bitter satisfaction. 3 years. 3 years since the last time they had been in the same space. He looked different, Slightly longer hair, a stubbled beard that hadn't been there before, deep, dark circles that no amount of men's makeup could hide. But the suit remained impeccable, his presence still imposing, and those greenish-grey eyes still had the power to disarm any defense she tried to raise. She didn't let him see that. He stopped in front of the coffee table, placing the brown envelope on the glass with a dry sound that cut through the jazz in the background. "Good evening, Richard. I came to bring something I should have brought 3 years ago." He stood up slowly, as if sudden movements could scare her away and make her disappear. His height always impressed Elizabeth, 6'2" of presence that filled any space, but she was wearing heels, and this time she wouldn't bend. "Richard!" Her voice came out hoarse, laden with something that felt like physical pain. You look great. I didn't come here to receive compliments." She pointed to the envelope, the divorce papers all filled out, just missing his signature. "I thought it would be more dignified to do this in person than to send it through a lawyer." Richard looked at the envelope as if it were a bomb about to explode. He didn't touch it, didn't move. He just took a deep breath, and Elizabeth noticed his hands trembled slightly. "Don't you want to sit and talk first?" "I didn't come here to talk. I came to end what should have ended a long time ago. 3 years, Richard. 3 years living in a ghost marriage because I was too cowardly to sign those papers and truly move on." She crossed her arms, a body armor hiding the fact that her heart was racing. "But now I'm ready, so please sign it quickly so I can leave and finally be free." The word "free" came out with so much venom that even she was startled. Richard closed his eyes for a moment, as if he had been slapped. When he opened them, there was something different there, a raw vulnerability that Elizabeth had never seen in her always controlled, always strategic husband, always 3 steps ahead of everyone. "I deserve this. I deserve every word, every gram of anger you feel for me, but please, give me 5 minutes, just 5 minutes to tell you what you never wanted to hear." "I don't want to hear excuses, Richard." "They aren't excuses, they are facts. Facts that you have the right to know before signing those papers and disappearing from my life forever." Elizabeth hesitated. Every fiber of her body screamed to grab the envelope, leave, and never look back. But there was something in his voice, a desperation so genuine, so raw, that it made her freeze. 5 minutes, then I'm leaving, with or without your signature." Richard nodded to the waiter, who brought sparkling water for Elizabeth and another shot of whiskey for him. Once they were alone, he began the scandal that destroyed his family. "It wasn't an accident, Elizabeth. It was an attack. A calculated attack, orchestrated by people from within my own company with a very clear goal: to take me down. Through you." Elizabeth felt her stomach churn. "What are you talking about?" Mark Taylor and Robert Fisher, 2 senior executives at Andrade Corporation. They knew I was about to close a $3 billion deal with European investors. They knew that if the deal went through, I would consolidate total control of the company, and they would never be able to pull off the internal coup they had been planning for years. Richard took a deep breath, his fingers tightening around the glass. "Then they attacked where they knew it would hurt the most, your family. They hired Danielle Brown, the compliance manager, to falsify documents, create fake transactions, and manufacture evidence against your father." The ground seemed to collapse beneath Elizabeth's feet. "You're saying my father was falsely accused, that it was all a setup?" "I saw everything. Every document, every headline, every second of suffering your father went through, all fabricated by people I trusted, people who worked by my side." Richard's voice broke, and she hadn't seen it coming. "I didn't protect you. I failed in the worst possible way." Elizabeth felt her legs weaken and sat on the sofa before she fell. "Why didn't you ever tell me this?" "I tried. I sent 23 letters explaining everything. You burned them all. Why did you abandon me? Elizabeth's voice rose, and she didn't care that other people in the lounge were looking. I was crumbling when I begged you to stay by my side. You vanished, sending the lawyer to give me legal advice as if I were just any client, not the woman you swore to protect. I know Richard didn't try to defend himself. He didn't raise his voice, just accepted each word like a deserved punch. I made the most strategic yet foolish decision of my life. I thought that if I stayed away publicly, I could hunt down the guilty without exposing you even more. I thought I was protecting you when in reality I was abandoning you. 3 years, Richard. 3 years that I believed you chose the company over me. I never chose the company. I chose the wrong battle. I chose to fight alone when I should have fought by your side. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands intertwined. It took me 4 months to track the irregular transfers, another 6 to gather enough evidence against Mark Roberts and Danielle Brown. I handed everything over to the federal police, testified in confidential inquiries, risked my own career to ensure they paid. Elizabeth felt something stir within her chest, and they paid. Mark got 8 years in prison, Robert 10, Danielle 6. They are serving their sentences to this day. Richard looked directly into her eyes. I recovered every cent that was stolen from your family, every cent. Elizabeth, corrections, everything. I publicly cleared your father's name, paid for ads in newspapers, interviews, official statements. I made it a point for everyone to know he was a victim, not a criminal. Elizabeth's hands trembled. She gripped the glass of water tightly. My parents know this. Richard nodded slowly. I went to their house a year ago, delivered all the evidence, all the financial restitution documents, asked for forgiveness. Your father forgave me, Elizabeth. Your mother did too. But you never knew because you never wanted to listen. Elizabeth felt tears burning her eyes but refused to let them fall. My parents have known for a year and never told me. I asked them not to tell you. I said that if you wanted to know, it had to be from me. It had to be your choice to listen, not an obligation imposed by them. The silence that fell between them was thick, suffocating. Outside, the rain intensified, pounding against the windows as if the sky were collapsing too. Elizabeth tried to process it, tried to fit this new version of the story with the one she had carried for 3 years. The anger was still there, pulsing alive, but now it had company, confusion, pain, and something dangerous she refused to name. You still abandoned me. The voice came out weak, broken. Even if you did all this behind the scenes, even if you destroyed the guilty and recovered the money, you weren't there when I needed you. You didn't hold my hand. You didn't wipe my tears. You weren't there. I know, and that's what destroys me every day since then. Richard ran a hand over his tired face. I did everything wrong, Elizabeth. I chose to handle it as a CEO, not as a husband. I chose strategy over presence and lost you. I lost the only thing that truly mattered. Elizabeth looked at the envelope on the table. The divorce papers that minutes ago seemed so right, so necessary, now felt like they weighed tons. Why are you telling me all this now? Why didn't you fight harder to reach me before? Why did you block me in every possible way? And why did I think you deserved to be happy, even if it was far from me? I thought that after everything I did wrong, the least I could do was let you be at peace. Richard picked up the envelope, held it in his hands. If you still want the divorce, I'll sign it now. No lawyers, no fight, no fuss. You ask. I'll give. You deserve this freedom. Then Elizabeth looked at him, really looked, and that's when she saw something that made her freeze. He was wearing the same perfume, the same woody scent she remembered from the shirt stored in the closet, the same that still woke her in some dreams. You never changed your perfume. Richard gave a sad smile. You never took the pictures from Aspen off the walls of the apartment. Elizabeth felt her blood run cold. How do you know that? Julia told me accidentally during a discussion months ago when she came to pick up some documents. She said you burned my letters but kept my clothes, that you swore to hate me but still sleep on the left side of the bed, the side that has always been mine. A tear escaped, then another. Elizabeth wiped them away angrily. That doesn't change anything. I know. I'm not saying this to manipulate you. I'm saying it because maybe we both need to stop pretending. Richard stood up, walked to the window, looked at the rain. I never moved on, Elizabeth. I had some dinners that were nothing more than dessert. I met beautiful, intelligent, amazing women. None came close to you. None made my heart beat differently. None made me forget for even a second that the woman I love still wears a ring hidden in a drawer. Elizabeth stood frozen. How do you know? Your father told me accidentally when he spoke of you with pride. He said you are strong, independent, that you picked yourself up alone but still keep the rings, and that he thinks deep down you never stopped loving me as much as I never stopped loving you. Elizabeth got up, grabbed her bag. She needed to leave before she did something. Completely insane. But Richard stepped forward, not to block the exit but to show something. He opened the first two buttons of his white shirt and revealed the left side of his chest. There, in delicate, permanent letters, was the name Elizabeth and the date 06-15. Her breath caught. I did this 6 months after you left. It hurts like hell, both the needle and what it represents, but you are here, Liz, right over my heart, and you're never leaving again. Elizabeth looked at that. Liz looked at the tattoo and felt something inside her shatter into 1,000 pieces. All the anger, all the hurt, all the pain from 3 years collided with an undeniable truth. She still loved that man. She loved him with the same intensity, the same desperation, the same blind devotion that had made her marry him on the best day of her life. And that terrified her. I need to leave. Hey, the voice came out trembling. Let me take you home. It's pouring outside. I'll call an Uber. Elizabeth, please, just to your building. After that, I'll disappear from your life if that's what you want, but I'm not going to let you get in a stranger's car in this rain. She should have refused. She should have run away and never looked back. But instead, she heard her own voice say, "Okay, just to the building." It was the first of many impossible decisions Liz would make that night. And if you think you know how this story will end, you can be sure you have no idea. Leave a comment if you would go back to the person who hurt you, even after discovering the truth. Because what happens inside that limousine will change everything. Richard's limousine was parked in front of the Crimson Lounge, black and imposing like a dangerous promise. The driver opened the back door without saying a word. Liz entered first, sliding into the soft leather seat that smelled of new car and woody perfume. Richard entered right behind her, keeping a respectful distance, the kind of distance that screamed the exact opposite: unresolved sexual tension, 3 years of pent-up longing, desire that never died, just lay buried alive. The door closed, the privacy glass rose, isolating them from the driver. The rain pounded harder on the roof, creating a sound bubble that made the world outside feel unreal, distant, non-existent. Liz looked out the window, trying to focus on the blurred lights of New York speeding by, anything to avoid looking at him, to avoid feeling the heat radiating from his body sitting so close, so dangerously close. "Hey, you're shaking." Richard's voice was low, careful. "I'm cold." Lie. She was burning inside, but admitting that would be admitting defeat. Richard took off his suit jacket and offered it to her. Liz looked at that simple gesture as if it were a trap. Probably was, but she took it anyway, draping it over her shoulders and hit by a devastating sensory wave, his scent embedded in the warm fabric, too familiar, too intimate for her own good. "Thanks. You don't need to thank me. You never did." Silence returned, but this time it was different, charged, electric, dangerous. Liz couldn't take it anymore. She turned to him, and the words came out before she could filter them. "Why didn't you fight for me, Richard? Why didn't you knock on my door, break the intercom glass, make a scene until I had to listen to you?" He found her eyes, and Liz saw raw pain there. "Because you had just spent 3 months being chased by cameras, reporters shoving microphones in your face, people invading your privacy in every way possible. I thought the last thing you needed was another man invading your space, even if that man was me, even if that man was dying inside. So you chose to respect my distance instead of fighting for us. I chose wrong again." Richard ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I always choose wrong when it comes to you, Liz. I always think I'm protecting you when I'm just hurting you in different ways." Today, Liz felt her chest tighten. "Do you have any idea how many nights I cried waiting for you to knock on my door? How many times I looked at my phone hoping for your call, even after blocking you? I wanted you to fight, Richard. I wanted you to prove to me that I was worth more than any corporate strategy, more than any rational decision. You always were worth more, always, but I'm an idiot who takes 3 years to understand the obvious." The limousine braked at a red light. The rain intensified, turning the world outside into a blur of lights and shadows. Liz looked at his large, strong hands, marked by scars she knew the origin of, hands that had touched her with reverence, that made her tremble, that knew every inch of her body like a decorated map. "I tried to forget you." Her voice came out in a whisper. "I tried with all my might. I went out with other men, kissed different lips, pretended I was moving on." "I know. Julia told me. And you went out with other women." Richard gave a bitter smile. "I tried 3 dinners that ended with dessert, 1 kiss that made me feel guilty as if I were cheating on you. Even though you weren't mine anymore, I gave up after that. I realized I can't replace you, Liz. There isn't another woman in the world who does what you do to me and what I do to you." Now Liz turned her whole body toward him, challenging. Richard held her gaze, intense, dangerous. "You destroy me and rebuild me at the same time. You make me want to be better and show me exactly where I failed. You take my sleep, my ground, my reason. And even after 3 years, even knowing you hate me, you still are the only woman I want to wake up next to every day for the rest of my life." Liz's heart raced. The air inside the limousine became rarefied, charged with electricity. "I don't hate you." No, I wanted to hate you. It would be so much easier, but I can only—" She bit her lip, trying to hold back the truth that threatened to escape. "I can only miss you every day. Every second." It was like breaking a dam. Richard closed his eyes, breathing, heavy hands gripping her own knees, tightly. "Don't do this to me. Don't give me hope if it's not real." And who said it wasn't real? Elizabeth was beyond reason now. 3 years of emotional dam bursting all at once. Who said I don't wake up every day on the left side of the bed because that's the side you always slept on? That I don't keep your clothes because they still smell like you? That I don't look at the rings every day and wonder how it would be if none of this had happened? Elizabeth. His voice was a warning of danger, a line being crossed, a point of no return. But she didn't stop. "Do you want to know the truth, Richard? The truth is, I spent 3 years building a fortress around my heart, pretending I was okay, pretending I had moved on. But just seeing you today, just hearing your voice, smelling your scent, looking at that damn tattoo made me realize that I never got over anything, that you still tear me apart inside." The limousine arrived at Elizabeth's building in Brooklyn, stopping in front of the gate. The rain was a deluge now, a deafening noise on the car roof. Elizabeth should have gotten out, should have thanked him for the ride, gone up to the apartment and locked the door between her and the biggest mistake or the biggest truth of her life. Instead, she opened the limousine door and ran out into the rain. Richard shouted after her, "Elizabeth, wait!" But she didn't wait. She ran to the gate, trying to type in the code with trembling hands, messing up twice, the rain soaking her navy blue dress, her hair sticking to her face, her heels slipping on the wet floor. Richard caught up in 3 strides, grabbed her arm, and turned her around. They were both soaked, breathless, looking at each other over the storm that was turning New York into an ocean. "Why are you running away from me?" Richard had to shout to be heard over the sound of the rain. "Because you scare me," Elizabeth shouted back, tears mixed with raindrops. "Because I know that if I stay close to you for one more second, I will do the stupidest thing of my life." "What thing?" "Forgive you, let you back in again, give you a half chance, knowing you could destroy me again." Richard held her face in his hands with a tenderness that contrasted with the desperation in his eyes. "I will never destroy you again. Never, Elizabeth. I learned the hard way, but I learned." "How can I trust that?" "You can't. I can only ask you to try." Elizabeth looked at him, her hair drenched, suit ruined, grey-green eyes shining with something that seemed like hope and desperation mixed, and made the decision, the wrong decision, the most conscious decision, the impossible decision. She pulled his face down and kissed him. It was a desperate kiss, wet with rain and tears, loaded with 3 years of longing, anger, hurt, and unresolved love. Richard's hands went to her waist, pulling her against his body as if 3 years of distance needed to be erased in seconds. Elizabeth intertwined her fingers in his hair, kissing him with fury, with hunger, with everything she had kept bottled up for so long. The rain fell mercilessly, but neither of them cared. There could have been a hurricane, and they wouldn't feel anything but each other. When they finally pulled apart, breathless, Richard rested his forehead against hers. "Bia, come up. With me?" The words came out before she could process the insanity of what he was proposing. Just for one night. Just to close this cycle. Richard stepped back a little, looking deep into her eyes. "Are you sure? Because if I go up, I don't know if I can leave again. Just one night, Richard. Just to say goodbye to you the right way, the way I never had the chance to." It was a lie. They both knew it. But Richard nodded, because he was also beyond reason, beyond control, beyond anything but the need to touch her, to have her, to prove that this was still real. Elizabeth typed the gate code with trembling hands. They crossed the garden, soaked, entered the elevator, leaving puddles of water behind. They went up in silence, only the sound of their heavy breathing and the hum of the elevator cutting through the tension. When the doors opened on the 8th floor, Elizabeth walked to the apartment door, fingers trembling so much that she dropped the key twice before managing to turn it in the lock. The door opened. She stepped inside, and Richard followed. When the door closed behind them, sealing them inside that apartment where memories still breathed in the walls, Elizabeth knew with absolute certainty that this night would change everything, and there was no turning back. The apartment was exactly as Richard remembered, but also completely different. The white walls, the plants on the shelf, the beige sofa that Elizabeth chose because she said it brought peace. But what made him freeze were the details. The picture of the two of them in Aspen still hanging on the living room wall, smiling under fake snow as if the world were eternally perfect, the picture of Malibu beside it. Embraced on the beach, the sunset tinting everything gold. Elizabeth hadn't taken them down. She hadn't erased them. She had kept the ghosts alive in the walls. He walked to the shelf, touched the frame with trembling fingers. "You kept the pictures." Elizabeth closed the door, leaning against it, soaked, vulnerable, dangerous. "I tried to take them down 1,000 times. I never could. Just like you never could change your cologne." Richard turned to her, water dripping on the wooden floor, clothes clinging to their bodies, hair dripping, but none of that mattered. What mattered was the electricity buzzing. Between them, charged, pulsing, about to explode. "Bia, if you changed your mind, if you want—" "I'm leaving. Open the closet in the bedroom." She spoke with a firm voice, despite the visible tremor in her body. Richard hesitated. "What did you hear?" "Open the closet in my bedroom and tell me what you see." He walked slowly to the bedroom as if entering sacred territory that could crumble with any step. He opened the closet door and froze. There, among the work dresses, blouses, and impeccable skirts of a corporate consultant, were 3 white dress shirts. His shirts. Richard recognized each one. The one he wore at their wedding, the one he put on during their first trip together, the one Elizabeth stole one night to sleep in because she said she felt safe with his scent. He pulled one of the shirts to his face and inhaled. It still smelled of the fabric softener he always used. Elizabeth had washed it, cared for it, preserved it. "I kept it because I'm weak, because I spent 3 years pretending I had moved on. But every time I opened that closet, the scent destroyed me and I couldn't throw it away." Richard placed the shirt back in its place and walked up to her, stopping inches away, close enough to feel the warmth, far enough to give her the final choice. "I'm weak too, Liz. I got a pathetic tattoo with your name. I turned down every woman who came along because none of them were you. I spent 3 years living on autopilot, just waiting for an impossible chance to fix what I broke." Elizabeth raised her hand and touched his chest over the wet shirt, exactly where she knew the tattoo was. "Show me again. I want to see it." "And properly." Richard obeyed, unbuttoning the soaked white shirt and letting it slide off his shoulders and fall to the floor. The tattoo was there, delicate yet permanent, on the left side of his chest. Elizabeth, 1506. She traced each letter with her fingertips. It hurt like hell, both the needle and what it meant, and he never regretted it. "Because you're exactly where you've always been meant to be." He placed her palm flat on his chest over the heart that was beating unevenly, impossibly close to forget. Elizabeth closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of his skin, the rapid beats of his heart. When she opened them, there was a decision there. Dangerous, conscious, irreversible. "Richard, I need you to understand one thing. If we do this, if I give myself to you today, it doesn't mean everything is resolved. It doesn't mean automatic forgiveness. It doesn't guarantee a future. It doesn't erase 3 years. It's just one night. One night for me to feel again what I've spent so long trying to forget." He held her face in his hands, looking deeply into her honey-colored eyes. "Are you sure? Because I can leave right now, Liz. I can sign the divorce papers and walk out of your life forever if that's what you really want." "I don't know what I want. I just know what I need right now. I need you, even if it's wrong, even if I regret it tomorrow. Then use me. Do what you need to do with me. But Liz..." His voice faltered. "If tomorrow you really want the divorce, I'll sign, I promise. But tonight, let me love you like I never stopped." Elizabeth pulled his face down and kissed him. Unlike the kiss in the rain, this one was slow, deep, filled with emotional weight. His hands found her waist, pulling her against him, eliminating any space between them. She ran her fingers through his wet hair, deepening the kiss, letting 3 years of longing pour out in that touch. Richard groaned softly against her mouth, and it was that vulnerable, needy sound that broke Elizabeth's last defense. She pulled away just enough to tug the soaked navy blue dress off her body and let it fall to the floor, standing there in black lingerie, skin tingling, looking at him with a mix of challenge and surrender. Richard drank in, the sight of her like a thirsty man. "You're even more beautiful than I remembered. You owe me 3 years of presence. Are you planning to make up for it tonight?" That was the signal he had been waiting for. Richard swept her up in one fluid motion, strong arms around her thighs, his mouth finding her neck, collarbone, shoulder. Elizabeth wrapped her legs around his waist, hands gripping his broad shoulders, breathing fast. He carried her to the bed, the same bed where she had slept alone for 3 years, and laid her down with a gentleness that contrasted with the urgency in his gaze. "Wait!" Elizabeth placed her hand on his chest, stopping him. "Tonight isn't about making beautiful love. It's not about being romantic or gentle. I need to feel. I need it to be real, raw, without filters." Richard understood. He wouldn't treat her like fragile porcelain. He would treat her like the strong woman she had become, but who now chose to be vulnerable with him. And he delivered exactly what she asked for. What happened in that bed was intense, desperate, filled with muffled moans, nails marking skin, mouths exploring territories they had never really forgotten. Elizabeth lost herself in his warmth, in the way Richard's body still fit perfectly with hers, as if 3 years hadn't passed, as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed, and that was exactly why every touch came with silent tears that Elizabeth couldn't hold back. Richard kissed each tear away, whispering apologies between kisses, telling her he loved her, that he never stopped, that he never would. She tried to respond, but the words caught in her throat, so she surrendered through her body. The way she arched against his touch, the way she moaned his name, the way she clung to him as if it were the last time. Elizabeth screamed his name, her body trembling all over, her nails digging into his back. Richard followed seconds later, his face buried in her neck, a hoarse groan that sounded like both a plea and a celebration. They stayed there, tangled together, heavy breaths, hearts beating out of sync, sweat and tears mingling. Richard rolled to the side but didn't let go, pulling Elizabeth to his chest, arms around her like a protective shield that had arrived 3 years too late. She rested her head on his chest, listening to his racing heart. "Are you hearing this? We just committed the biggest madness of our lives. If it's madness, let it be eternal." Richard kissed the top of her head. Elizabeth laughed, but the sound came out wet with tears. "You've always been good with words, and you've always been good at disarming me with a look." A comfortable silence fell between them. Outside, the rain had diminished to a light drizzle. Inside that room, time seemed suspended. Neither past nor future, just the present. Richard ran his fingers through her hair, a movement that had always calmed Elizabeth. "Since the first night they slept together, can I ask you a question?" "It depends on the question. Tomorrow morning when you wake up, are you going to send me away?" "No." Elizabeth took a while to respond. When she did, her voice was small, frightened. "I don't know. Part of me wants you to stay forever. Part of me is afraid you'll leave again. I'm not going anywhere, Bea. If you give me half a chance, I'll prove every day that I choose you above any empire, above any strategy, above anything." "How can I believe that?" "You'll see. I can only show you, but I need you to let me try." Elizabeth curled closer to him, tightening her arms around his waist. "And if I can't forgive? What if the hurt is too great? Then we'll work on it together. Couples therapy, difficult conversations, as many fights as it takes, but we'll work on it because I'm not giving up on us again." She lifted her face, looking into his eyes. "Promise me one thing. Anything. If tomorrow I still want the divorce, you sign without a fight, without trying to convince me. You sign and let me go." Richard hesitated. The pain in his gaze was physical, but he felt it. "I promise. If that's what you really want, I'll sign. But Bea, just let me ask you one question first." "What question?" "Is it really what you want, or is it what you think you should want?" Elizabeth had no answer. So, as the connection returned to his chest, she closed her eyes and let exhaustion take over. "And if you're still here with me, thank you. Thank you for not giving up on this story, because the best and the most painful is yet to come." Tomorrow, when Elizabeth woke up, one impossible decision would need to be made, and the consequences would change everything. Elizabeth woke up in pain, not the emotional pain she had carried for 3 years, which continued to throb, but a different pain. It was physical, in her thighs, her back, in muscles she hadn't used in too long. The pain of someone who had spent the night surrendering with an intensity that her body had almost forgotten how to process. She tried to move, but her legs didn't cooperate. Slowly, Richard's hoarse voice sounded beside her. Elizabeth turned her head. He was propped up on his elbow, watching her with that expression that mixed tenderness and concern, messy hair unshaven, eyes still heavy with sleep, looking beautiful in a disheveled way that always destroyed her. "I can't walk," she said, half laughing, half mortified. Richard smiled a small, guilty smile. "I know, sorry, we got carried away." "You left me unable to walk, Richard Anderson." Elizabeth covered her face with her hands, feeling the heat rise to her cheeks. "How am I going to work today?" "You're not." He pulled her hands from her face, intertwining their fingers. "You're going to stay here. Let me take care of you, and we're going to talk for real this time. No running away, no hiding, no masks." Elizabeth looked at their intertwined fingers, fingers that fit perfectly together as they always had. "Richard, I know what you're going to say, that this was just one night, that it doesn't change anything, that you still want the divorce." He squeezed her hand. "But before you decide, let me tell you the rest, the part you don't know yet." She hesitated, wanting to flee, jump out of bed, put her armor back on, keep a safe distance. But her body wouldn't obey, and maybe that was a sign to stay, to listen, to finally face the whole truth. "Go on," Richard said. He got up, grabbed a robe that was hanging on the chair, the robe he had that Elizabeth had never had the courage to throw away, and carefully put it on her, as if he were taking care of something precious and fragile. Then he put on just the pants from the night before and sat on the edge of the bed, facing her. "When I found out that Mark Roberts and Danielle had fabricated the scandal against your father, my first reaction was to destroy them publicly, expose them to the media, sue, make a whole circus out of it. But my lawyers warned me that if I did that, the investigation would become headline news again. Your father would be dragged back into the spotlight, and your family would relive the whole hell, only now with the added burden of being associated with my personal revenge." Elizabeth felt her stomach churn. "So you chose to do everything in silence?" "I chose to protect your family from further exposure. I handed the evidence over to the federal police on the condition that the investigation remained confidential until the arrest. It took almost 2 years, Bia, 2 years tracking every transaction, every email, every lie. 2 years building." It was an irrefutable case. "For 2 years, I believed you had abandoned me, I know, and it destroyed me." Richard ran his hand over his tired face. But there was more. "When the 3 of them were arrested, I didn't stop. I recovered every penny that had been diverted. It was almost $2.5 million in fake investments they created in your father's name. I returned everything with interest. Your father not only had his name cleared, but also received back more than he lost." Elizabeth felt tears burning her eyes. "My father never told me this because I asked him not to. He said that if you wanted to know, it had to be your choice to hear it, not the obligation of others pressuring you." Richard picked up the phone from the bedside table. "I can show you something." She felt it. He opened a folder of documents and handed the phone to her. Elizabeth scrolled through the screen, seeing bank statements, transfer receipts, legal documents, all detailed, all verified. The last image was a photo of Richard next to her parents, the 3 of them smiling discreetly. The date was from a year ago. "You met with them several times, first to deliver the evidence and the money, then because your father invited me to lunch. He said he wanted to understand what really happened. We talked for hours. He forgave me, Liz. Your mother did too. They said they understood the impossible position I was in, and that despite everything, I did the right thing by hunting down the real culprits. Elizabeth dropped the phone, covered her face with her hands, and cried. She cried for the pain of 3 years believing in abandonment. She cried for the revelation that there was truth hidden behind the silence. She cried because the story she had built in her head was crumbling, reconstructing itself into something completely different. Richard pulled her to his chest, letting her cry, stroking her hair without saying anything, just being present. When the tears subsided, Elizabeth pulled away, wiping her face with trembling hands. Why didn't you fight harder to tell me this before? Why didn't you invade my life, break the barrier, and force me to listen? Because you had just spent months being invaded by cameras, reporters, people judging you without knowing the truth. I thought the last thing you needed was another man forcing you to do something against your will, even if it was to listen to me. He held her face in his hands. I was wrong, Liz. I was wrong to distance myself. I was wrong not to fight harder. I was wrong to think that protecting you meant disappearing. But I never, not for a second, stopped loving you. I never stopped working to fix the damage. I just did it all alone when I should have done it by your side. Elizabeth looked into his eyes, seeing the raw vulnerability that the Richard of the past would never have shown. And now, what do you want from me? Now I want to start over for real, from scratch. Not the marriage we had, because that died 3 years ago on that Tuesday in March. I want to build a new one where I don't run away when it gets tough, where I stay, fight, talk and repair, where you are a priority above any empire, above any strategy. How can I trust that? How do I know that the next time a crisis appears, you won't disappear again thinking you're protecting me? Richard let her go, stood up from the bed, picked up the suit pants that were thrown on the floor, and took a letter from his inner pocket, handing it to Elizabeth. What is this? My resignation from the Anderson Corporation, signed and dated today. Elizabeth opened the letter and read the formal lines. It was real. He was resigning as CEO, passing control to the board of directors effective in 30 days. Richard, you can't do this. The company is your life. No, you are my life. The company is just work, and I spent 3 years understanding the difference. He knelt in front of her, took her hands in his. Liz, I'm not going to let a position define who I am anymore. I'm not going to choose meetings over being by your side. If you give me a real chance, I will restructure everything. I will work remotely, cut international trips, and be present, not physically all the time, but emotionally every day. Elizabeth felt her chest tighten. You're willing to give up everything for me? I'm not giving up anything. I'm choosing what really matters. And you, Elizabeth Smith, are the only thing that has ever mattered. It just took me 3 years and 1 devastating night to understand that it's pointless to have the world if I don't have you. She looked at that man kneeling in front of her, the same man who made her cry rivers of tears, the same one who spent 3 years working in the shadows to fix the damage, the same one who carried her name tattooed on his chest, impossible to erase. I still love you. The words came out in a broken whisper. I tried to stop. I tried with all my strength, but I failed miserably. You are still the first thing I think of in the morning and the last at night. I still sleep hugging the pillow, pretending it's you. I still keep the rings as if they were sacred relics. Richard closed his eyes, breathing heavily. Then we try. We give ourselves a real chance, with conditions. Elizabeth lifted her chin, regaining some of the strength that characterized her. Couples therapy every week, non-negotiable, I agree. Difficult conversations without running away, without disappearing when it gets uncomfortable. I agree. And if you disappear again, if you choose work over me, if you make me feel abandoned one more time, it's over for good. No more chances. Richard held her face, looking deep into her eyes. Never again. I swear on my life, Liz, never again. Elizabeth pulled him in for a kiss, different from their previous kisses. The night before was soft, filled with the promise of a conscious new beginning. When they separated, she leaned her forehead against his. I'm still angry with you. It still hurts. It will hurt for a while, I know, and I will be here while you process. I will endure the anger, the crises, the doubts. I will prove every day that I have changed. You promise? I promise, and this time I will keep it. Elizabeth took a deep breath, feeling something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. A frightening, fragile hope, but real. Then let's try, but slowly. One day at a time, Richard smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen since she entered the Crimson Lounge. One day at a time, I can live with that. Richard picked her up again, ignoring her protests about not being able to walk, and took her to the bathroom. He prepared a warm bath, cared for her with a tenderness that brought more tears to Elizabeth's eyes. Afterward, he dressed her in a robe, made coffee, prepared toast and fruit, and sat beside her at the kitchen table as if it were the most natural thing in the world, as if they had never spent 3 years apart, as if they were just starting over. And maybe that was exactly it. Not a happy ending, not a return to what it was before, but a conscious new beginning. A love that broke, bled, almost died, but chose to breathe again. Elizabeth looked at him, his hair messy, unshaven, tired but hopeful smile, and knew she had made the right decision. It would hurt, it would require work, there would be days of doubt and nights of fear, but it would be worth it because some love stories don't end happily the first time. Some need to break to learn how to rebuild themselves stronger, and this one was just beginning again. 2 years later, Aspen, Colorado. On a Saturday morning when the sun stubbornly shone between lazy clouds, painting the sky in pastel tones that seemed to come from an impressionist painting, Elizabeth stood in front of the mirror in the rustic inn's room, observing the reflection of the woman she had become. The wedding dress was different from her first marriage. No heavy satin and endless train. This one was light, made of delicate French lace, falling in soft waves to her ankles, with thin straps, a discreet neckline, and a back that was partially bare, revealing a small tattoo she'd gotten 6 months earlier, a phoenix rising from the ashes, right between her shoulder blades. Julia was sitting on the bed behind her, already dressed for the ceremony, watching her friend with a smile that mixed pride and contained emotion. "Are you sure about this?" Liz asked. The question came not with judgment, but with the care of someone who knows every emotional scar. Elizabeth smiled, touching the simple pearl necklace that belonged to her grandmother. "This time it's different, Ju. This time I know exactly what I'm getting into. He has changed. He really has. He's not perfect. We argue, disagree, have tough days, but he stays every time it gets hard. He doesn't run away. He sits, talks, faces it." Elizabeth turned to her friend. "Remember when I had that panic attack 3 months ago, when all the traumas came back at once, and I freaked out, saying he was going to leave me again?" Julia nodded. "I remember. You called me at 2 a.m. crying. Yeah, he didn't leave my side. He cancelled a very important meeting the next day, took me to therapy, held my hand throughout the entire session, listened to me pour out 3 years of accumulated hurt, and in the end he just said, 'I deserve all this anger and I will stay here while you need to process.'" Elizabeth felt tears burning her eyes. "He stayed, Ju. Every time he stayed." Julia stood up and hugged her friend tightly. "Then marry this man. Marry him for real this time, and be happy because you deserve it." A gentle knock on the door interrupted the moment. Mary, Elizabeth's mother, entered with teary eyes, wearing a simple lilac dress, her hair in a low bun, a smile that carried years of pain transformed into wisdom. "My daughter, you look beautiful, like a dream." Elizabeth hugged her. "Mother, feeling the lavender scent that had always calmed her since childhood. "Thank you for being here, Mom, for forgiving him, for giving us this chance." Mary held Elizabeth's face between her hands. "Liz, listen to what I'm going to tell you. Your father and I have been through a lot these past few years. We lost reputation, money, sleep, health. But do you know what hurts the most? Seeing you suffer, seeing you broken, trying to be strong alone, carrying pain you didn't need to carry." She wiped away a tear that escaped. "Richard made mistakes, serious ones, but he fixed them. He spent years of his life fixing them. A man who fixes things, who stays, who changes. That's rare, my daughter. Don't let him go." "I won't let him go. Not again." Outside, in the clearing prepared for the ceremony, rustic wooden chairs were arranged in a semicircle around a simple arch made of intertwined branches and wildflowers, hydrangeas, lavenders, white daisies. Nothing ostentatious, nothing that needed to impress, just 20 people. Elizabeth's parents, Julia, and a few close friends, 2 of Richard's co-workers who had become chosen family. Richard stood by the arch, wearing a navy suit without a tie, the first button undone, hair slicked back, beard trimmed, but what caught the most attention was the expression on his face. Nervousness mixed with pure emotion. His hands trembled slightly, his eyes glistening with moisture. Dr. Henry approached, placing a hand on the shoulder of his nervous son-in-law. "I'm afraid I'll wake up and find this is all a dream." The father-in-law smiled. "It's not a dream, my son. It's a second chance, and this time you won't mess it up." "I swear I won't." Richard looked at the man he almost lost as family. "Dr. Henry, I will never be able to thank you enough for the forgiveness you have given. He gave me, I didn't deserve it, but I did deserve it because I came with an open heart, admitting my mistakes, willing to make amends." Dr. Henry squeezed his shoulder, "And more importantly, you earned my daughter's forgiveness." That was the hardest part. The music began to play. It wasn't the traditional wedding march, but a soft, instrumental version of Ludovico's delicate and emotional voice. People stood up, and Elizabeth appeared at the entrance of the clearing, causing Richard to forget how to breathe. She was absolutely stunning, not just for the physical beauty she had always possessed, but for the light she radiated. She was no longer the young, idealistic bride of the first wedding. She was the woman who had gone through fire, rebuilt herself from the ashes, and now chose to love with her eyes wide open. Dr. Henry offered his arm to his daughter. Elizabeth intertwined hers, and they walked slowly through the clearing. But what made Richard completely crumble was when she smiled at him, that smile that said, "I choose you every day, forever." He couldn't hold back the tears that came silently as he watched the love of his life walk towards him again for the second time. But this time, he was prepared. This time he knew exactly the value of what he was receiving. When they reached the arch, Dr. Henry didn't hand over his daughter immediately. He looked at Richard, his voice firm but filled with emotion. "Richard, you asked me a question 5 years ago, whether I thought you would take care of my daughter. I said I hoped so. Today, I no longer hope. I know. So you can have her, but remember, if you mess up again, there won't be a third chance." Richard extended his hand and shook his father-in-law's hand firmly. "There won't be a need, I promise." Dr. Henry placed his daughter's hand in Richard's, and the simple gesture carried the weight of forgiveness, rebuilding, and hope. The officiant, a college friend of Elizabeth's, began the ceremony with simple words about second chances, resilient love, and the courage to start over. But the moment that truly mattered was the vows. Richard held Elizabeth's hands, looked deeply into those honey-colored eyes that had haunted him for 3 years, and began, "Liz, I'm not going to promise that I will be perfect. I've already proven that I'm not. I will make mistakes. I will annoy you. I will forget to put the toilet seat down. I will leave clothes thrown over the chair." Soft laughter came from the audience. But I will promise other things. I promise to be there on the good days, the bad days, the impossible days. I promise to never choose work over you again. I promise to fight by your side, not run away when it gets tough. I promise to listen to you even when you're shouting things I don't want to hear. I promise to hold your hand during anxiety attacks, wipe your tears, be the safe harbor I failed to be the first time. His voice faltered. I promise to love you with real presence, not from a distance. I promise to choose you every day for the rest of my life, because you, Elizabeth Smith, are the only certainty I have in this chaotic world. Elizabeth was openly crying. Tears streamed down her face, but her smile was genuine and complete. Richard, when I married you the first time, I promised to love you forever, in joy and in sorrow, in health and in sickness. I kept half of that promise. I loved you even when it hurt, even when I shouldn't have. But today, I promise differently. I promise to love you wisely, not blindly. I promise to hold you accountable when you're wrong, because real love doesn't accept crumbs. I promise to remain strong, independent, whole, because I've learned that love isn't losing yourself. It's sharing the road with someone worth it. She squeezed his hands. I promise to forgive, but not forget, because scars remind us that we survived. I promise to build with you a love that isn't perfect but works, that communicates, that repairs, that persists, because you, Richard Anderson, taught me that true love isn't never being wrong. It's staying to fix things when you are. The officiant could barely get through the traditional words. I now pronounce you. Richard didn't wait for him to finish. He pulled Elizabeth in for a kiss that drew applause, cheers of joy, and more tears from the small but emotional audience. When they separated, he leaned his forehead against hers and whispered just for her to hear, "Thank you for giving me this second chance. I won't waste it. I know you won't, because now I won't accept less than I deserve." The celebration was simple. A barbecue outdoors, local wine, live music from a violinist playing folk music. People laughed, talked, and celebrated. It wasn't a fairy tale wedding, but something more real. Two people who loved each other, broke, and chose to rebuild together. That night, when the guests had gone home and the clearing was lit only by fireflies and stars, Elizabeth and Richard were left alone, sitting on the grass, he with his blazer thrown aside, she, barefoot with her wedding dress crumpled, gazing at the starry sky of Aspen. "Hey, do you regret anything?" Richard asked softly. Elizabeth thought for a moment and then answered honestly, "I regret the pain of the 3 lost years, the tears that could have been avoided. But I don't regret the journey, because maybe we needed to break to learn how to rebuild the right way." "Hey, do you think we would have gotten here without the pain?" "I don't think so. Pain taught us things that happiness never would. It taught me to be strong. It taught you to be present. It taught us that love isn't just feeling butterflies in your stomach. It's choosing to stay when the butterflies die, and all that's left is hard work." Richard lay back on the grass, pulling her to lie on his chest. "I love you the wrong way, the right way, the way that breaks and fixes. I love you with everything I am." Elizabeth nestled her head on his shoulder. Looking at the stars, "I love you too. And this time I trust this love, because it's not fairy tale love, it's real people love." They remained there in comfortable silence, listening to the wind in the branches and the distant sound of cicadas, two survivors of the same disaster who chose to rebuild together. It wasn't a perfect ending. There would still be difficult days, discussions, crises, moments of doubt. But now they knew something they didn't know the first time. True love isn't the one that never faces the storm. It's the one that faces the storm and chooses not to let go. And Elizabeth, looking at the stars with her heart finally at peace, smiled, because she had discovered something that took 3 years and 1 Impossible night to understand. Second chances are rare, but when they come, when they are real, when they are built on truth instead of fantasy, they are worth every tear shed along the way. And this one was worth everything. And you who are here with me until the end of this story, thank you. Thank you for not giving up, for believing that love can be rebuilt, for understanding that real happy endings are those where people work to deserve them. Thank you. If this story touched you in any way, leave your opinion in the comments. Tell me, do you believe in second chances? Would you go back to someone who hurt you if that person truly changed? Your story matters to me. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, subscribe now. Leave a like on this video because it helps bring more stories like this to you. Real stories of people who bleed, suffer, grow, and choose to love despite everything. Because in the end, it's not about never falling. It's about getting up together always. Until the next story, and remember, true love isn't perfection. It's a choice every day, forever. She asks for a divorce and surrenders to her husband for the last time. He leaves her unable to walk the next day.